The gunshot that killed her father echoed through Felicity Porter's mind as she urged her horse through the freezing November wind. Her fingers numb inside her leather gloves, and her vision blurred by tears that froze on her cheeks. She had been riding for 3 hours since fleeing the massacre at the trading post in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where outlaws had murdered her father and 2 other merchants in cold blood. And now, the sky had turned the color of iron and snow had begun to fall in thick, relentless sheets that swallowed the landscape whole. Her horse stumbled on the uneven terrain, and she knew with a sinking dread that they could not continue much longer in this weather. The blizzard had descended with terrifying speed, transforming the world into a white void where she could barely see 10 feet ahead. And the temperature had dropped so rapidly that her breath came out in harsh gasps that burned her lungs. She had no clear destination, only the desperate need to put distance between herself and the men who had killed her father, though she doubted they would pursue her in this storm. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at her cloak and threatening to unseat her from the saddle. Her horse whinnied in distress, its hooves slipping on ground that was rapidly becoming treacherous with ice and snow. Felicity knew she was in mortal danger now, not from outlaws but from the elements themselves. People died in storms like this, froze to death within sight of shelter they could not see through the blinding snow. Just when she thought she might have to dismount and try to dig some kind of shelter in the snow, a dark shape emerged from the whiteness ahead. At first, she thought it was a trick of her desperate mind, but as she drew closer, she realized it was real. A small cabin standing alone in the wilderness, smoke rising from its chimney. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that she nearly wept again. She dismounted on shaking legs and led her horse toward the structure, her boots sinking deep into the snow with each step. Before she could reach the door, it swung open, and a man appeared in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the warm light from within. He took one look at her and immediately came forward, not bothering with a coat despite the brutal cold. "Get inside," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. He took her horse's reins from her frozen fingers. "I will see to your animal. Go on, get warm." Felicity was too cold and too exhausted to argue. She stumbled through the door into the blessed warmth of the cabin, her whole body beginning to shake violently as the heat hit her frozen skin. The cabin was small but well-maintained, with a stone fireplace where a good fire burned, a rough-hewn table and chairs, a bed in one corner, and various supplies neatly stored on shelves. She stood dripping melted snow onto the wooden floor, unable to do anything but shake. The man came back inside a few minutes later, brushing snow from his dark hair. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble and eyes that were a startling pale blue in his weathered face. He wore simple clothes, a worn flannel shirt and dark trousers, and moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his solitude. "Your horse is in the lean-to out back with mine," he said, closing the door firmly against the storm. "She will be all right there, out of the wind. Now, let us get you thawed out before you lose any fingers or toes." He guided her to a chair near the fire, his hands gentle but impersonal. Felicity found herself sitting while he knelt before her and began unlacing her boots. She knew she should protest, should say something, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. "I am Nathan Turner," he said as he worked. "This is my hunting cabin. I come out here for weeks at a time, trapping mostly. You are safe here." Felicity P. Porter," she managed through her chattering teeth. He glanced up at her, and she saw something shift in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "You are a long way from anywhere, Miss Porter. What brought you out in this storm?" The memory of her father's death crashed over her again, and this time she could not hold back the sob that tore from her throat. Nathan's hands stilled on her boots for a moment. Then he finished removing them and her wet socks, wrapping her feet in a thick blanket before standing. "Forgive me," he said quietly. "That was thoughtless. You can tell me when you are ready or not at all. First, we need to get you completely dry and warm." He moved to a chest in the corner and pulled out some clothing, what looked like an extra shirt and a pair of long underwear. "These will be far too large for you, but they are dry and warm. I will turn my back while you change out of those wet things. Your dress and everything else can dry by the fire." Felicity took the offered clothing with trembling hands. Nathan turned away, facing the wall with his arms crossed, and she quickly stripped out of her soaking dress, petticoats, and undergarments, the cold air making her gasp before she pulled on his dry clothes. They were indeed enormous on her, but they were blessedly dry and soft from many washings. "I am decent," she said, her voice still shaky. He turned back and began hanging her wet things on a line he strung near the fire. The domesticity of the action seemed strange given the circumstances. Here she was, alone in a cabin with a man she had never met, wearing his clothes while outside a blizzard raged. By all rights she should have been terrified, but something about Nathan Turner's steady, calm presence made her feel safe rather than afraid. "Now," he said, ladling something hot from a pot that hung over the fire. "You will drink this. It is just venison stew, but it is hot and it will help." He handed her a tin cup filled with rich, steaming broth and chunks of meat and vegetables. Felicity wrapped her hands around it, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers, then took a sip. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, or perhaps she was simply cold and hungry enough that anything would have tasted wonderful. Nathan poured a cup for himself and sat down in the other chair, giving her space but staying close to the fire. For several minutes they sat in silence except for the crackling of the flames and the howling of the wind outside. Felicity felt life slowly returning to her limbs, the violent shaking subsiding to occasional shivers. "Thank you," she said finally. "If I had not found your cabin, I would have died out there." "God provides shelter in the storm," Nathan said quietly, staring into his cup. "I am glad you found this place." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. His expression was thoughtful, almost wondering, as if he were working out some puzzle in his mind. Before she could ask what he meant, he stood and went to check the fire, adding another log. "That storm is going to last through the night at least," he said. "Possibly longer. You can have the bed. I will sleep on the floor near the fire." "I could not possibly take your bed," Felicity protested. "You can and you will," Nathan said firmly. "I have slept on worse than a clean floor in a warm cabin, I assure you." The exhaustion was catching up with her now, the warmth and food and the emotional toll of the day's horrors combining to make her eyelids heavy. But she could not sleep without telling him something of what had happened. She owed him that much. "My father was killed today," she said, her voice breaking on the words. "We were at the trading post in Fort Smith. He was a merchant. 3 men came in and demanded money. When my father tried to resist, they shot him. They killed 2 others as well. I managed to slip out the back while they were occupied with robbing the till. I took one of the horses and I just rode. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away." Nathan had turned to face her, and the compassion in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "I am so very sorry," he said, and she could hear the genuine sorrow in his voice. "No one should have to witness such violence, especially against their own kin." "He was all I had left," Felicity whispered. "My mother died when I was 12, 8 years ago now. It has been just my father and me since then, and now he is gone and I am alone." "You are not alone," Nathan said, and the intensity in his voice made her look up at him. "You are here and you are alive, and that matters. Your father would want you to survive to live." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Nathan seemed to understand that she needed silence now, and he busied himself with preparing a bedroll on the floor, using several thick blankets and what looked like a buffalo hide. When he had finished, he gestured to the bed. "Try to rest," he said. "Tomorrow we will figure out what to do next, once the storm has passed." Felicity stood and made her way to the bed, which was surprisingly comfortable, with a real mattress stuffed with what felt like corn husks and several heavy quilts. She lay down and pulled the covers up to her chin, staring at the ceiling. Nathan banked the fire so it would burn low through the night, then settled onto his bedroll. Within minutes, she heard his breathing deepen and slow, but sleep eluded her for a long time. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father falling, saw the blood spreading across the wooden floor of the trading post. When she finally slept, she dreamed of snow and darkness and her father's voice calling to her from somewhere far away. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon frying, and for a disoriented moment she could not remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back: her father's death, the desperate flight, the storm, this cabin, and the man who had taken her in. She sat up and saw Nathan at the stove, cooking breakfast. Gray light filtered through the single window, and she could hear the wind still howling outside. "The storm has not let up," Nathan said without turning around. He seemed to have an uncanny awareness of her presence. "If anything, it has gotten worse. We will be here at least another day, maybe two." Felicity rose from the bed and went to the window, peering out at the wall of white beyond the glass. Snow had drifted halfway up the side of the cabin, and she could not see more than a few feet in any direction. A tendril of fear curled through her stomach. She had heard stories of people trapped by blizzards, starving or going mad from cabin fever. But when she glanced back at Nathan, his calm, steady presence reassured her. He seemed like a man who knew how to survive, who would not panic in the face of danger. "I have plenty of supplies," he said, answering the question she had not asked. "Food enough for a month if we are careful, and firewood stacked outside under cover. We will not starve or freeze." "I do not want to be a burden," Felicity said quietly. "You are not a burden." Nathan plated the bacon and some Johnny cakes he had been frying, then poured 2 cups of coffee. "You are someone who needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That is all." They sat down to eat, and Felicity found herself studying him in the gray morning light. He had a strong, honest face, she thought, the kind of face that belonged to a man who knew hard work and did not shy away from it. There was something gentle about him, too, a kindness in the way he moved and spoke that contrasted with his rough exterior. She wondered what had brought him out to this lonely cabin, what he was running from or searching for in the solitude of the wilderness. "How long have you been trapping?" she asked, partly to make conversation and partly because she was genuinely curious. 5 years, ever since I got back from the war," Nathan said. He did not specify which war, but she assumed he meant the conflict that had ended in 1865, 15 years ago now. It was November of 1880, a year she would remember for the rest of her life as the year she lost everything and found something she had not known she was searching for. "I did some ranching work before that, cowboying mostly. But after the war I found I preferred being alone. Too many people, too much noise, it all felt wrong somehow. Out here I can think. I can breathe." Felicity understood that in a way she had not expected to. She had lived her whole life in towns and cities, surrounded by people, but she had often felt alone in the crowds. There was something about solitude that called to her, something about the wild places that spoke to a part of her soul she had learned to keep hidden in polite society. "You ever get lonely?" she asked. Nathan considered the question for a long moment, his pale blue eyes distant. "Sometimes," he admitted, "especially in the evenings when the work is done and there is nothing to do but sit and think. I find myself wishing I had someone to talk to, someone to share the silence with." He looked at her then, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "But I have not met anyone who seemed to understand why I choose this life, so I have stayed alone." "I think I understand," Felicity said softly. "Not the trapping part, but the need for quiet, for space to be yourself without the constant judgment and expectations of others." A slow smile spread across Nathan's face, transforming it from merely handsome to genuinely beautiful. "I thought you might," he said. They finished their breakfast in comfortable silence, and then Nathan insisted on washing up while Felicity checked on their horses in the lean-to. She pulled on her boots, which had dried overnight, and wrapped herself in a heavy coat Nathan provided before braving the storm. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet the moment she stepped outside, and the cold was so intense it felt like knives against her exposed skin. She fought her way around to the back of the cabin, where the lean-to provided some shelter. Both horses were there, standing close together for warmth, with plenty of hay and a bucket of water that Nathan must have brought earlier. Felicity's mare, a roan she had taken from the trading post in her flight, nickered softly when she saw her. Felicity stroked the horse's nose, murmuring soothing words. Nathan's horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding, watched her with calm, intelligent eyes. She stayed with the horses for a few minutes, making sure they were comfortable, then fought her way back to the cabin. By the time she got inside, she was shaking with cold again, despite the short exposure. Nathan took one look at her and guided her back to the fire, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "That storm is vicious," he said. "Worst I have seen in years. We are not going anywhere for a while." The reality of their situation settled over Felicity. She was trapped in a small cabin with a man she had met less than 24 hours ago, with no idea how long the storm would last. By all social conventions, her reputation was completely ruined. If anyone ever found out she had spent days alone with a man, unmarried and unchaperoned, she would be considered fallen, unfit for polite society. But given that her father was dead and she had no other family, no prospects, and no home to return to, she found she did not care much about her reputation. What mattered was survival, both physical and in some deeper sense she was only beginning to understand. "Tell me about your father," Nathan said gently, settling into the chair across from her. "What kind of man was he?" At first Felicity thought she could not bear to talk about it, that the pain was too fresh and raw. But something about Nathan's patient, expectant silence invited confession, and she found the words spilling out. "He was a good man," she said. "Honest in his dealings, kind to those less fortunate. He taught me to read and write and do figures, said a woman needed to be educated just as much as a man. He let me help him in the business, even though other merchants thought it scandalous to have a woman involved in trade. He treated me as a partner, not just a daughter to be married off to the highest bidder." "He sounds like a rare man indeed," Nathan said. "He was." Felicity stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. "He wanted more for me than marriage to some shopkeeper or farmer. He said I had a head for business and I should use it. We were planning to open a new store in Benton, Arkansas, something larger than what we had in Fort Smith. He had been saving for years. We were going to leave next spring." Her voice broke. "And now he is gone, and all those plans, all those dreams, they died with him." Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression intent. The plans may have died, but you did not. You could still go to Benton, still open that store. It would be harder alone, but not impossible. Felicity shook her head. I have no money. Whatever my father had saved was in the trading post, and those outlaws surely took it all. I have nothing but the clothes I was wearing and a stolen horse. Then you start over, Nathan said simply. You are alive, and you are strong enough to survive what would have killed many others. That is not nothing. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the hope his words seemed to offer, but the grief was too heavy, too suffocating. She turned away, not wanting him to see the tears that had started to fall again. Nathan stood and moved closer, but he did not touch her, just stood near enough that she could feel his presence, solid and reassuring. When I came back from the war, he said quietly, I was not the same man who had left. I had seen and done things that changed me in ways I did not fully understand. I felt lost, adrift, like I no longer fit in the world. I came out here to these mountains to try to find myself again, or maybe to find some kind of peace. And I prayed, Miss Porter. I prayed every day for God to send me a purpose, a reason to keep going beyond simple survival. Felicity looked up at him, surprised by this confession. Nathan was staring into the fire, his jaw tight. Last night, when I heard your horse outside, I thought at first I was imagining things. No one would be out in a storm like that. But then I looked out and saw you, and something inside me knew. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his pale blue eyes took her breath away. I asked God to send you through that storm, Miss Porter. Maybe not you specifically, but someone. Someone who needed help, someone who needed shelter, someone who might need me as much as I needed them. And here you are. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Felicity felt her heart beating hard in her chest, felt something shift and settle inside her, like a key turning in a lock she had not known existed. You prayed for me, she whispered. I prayed for purpose, Nathan said. I prayed for a reason to come down from this mountain and rejoin the living. I prayed for hope. And then you appeared out of the storm, and I knew my prayers had been answered. Felicity stood slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. She and Nathan were only a few feet apart now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, could see the faint scar along his left temple. She had known this man for less than a day, and yet she felt she understood him better than people she had known her entire life. I do not believe in coincidence, she said softly. My father used to say that God works in mysterious ways, that even in tragedy there can be purpose. I did not understand what he meant until now. What do you understand now? Nathan asked, his voice rough. That maybe I was meant to find you. That maybe in losing everything, I found exactly what I did not know I needed. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were calloused and warm, and the touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. I know this is too soon, he said. I know you are grieving and vulnerable, and I should not say these things. But I feel I would be dishonest if I did not tell you that something in my soul recognized something in yours the moment you walked through that door. I have never believed in love at first sight. I thought it was foolish romanticism. But now I am not so sure. Felicity's breath caught. No man had ever spoken to her like this, with such raw honesty, such vulnerability. The men who had courted her in Fort Smith had been proper and distant, speaking in platitudes about the weather and local gossip, never revealing anything real about themselves. Nathan was offering her his truth, his heart, and it terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. I feel it too, she admitted. I thought I was going mad, feeling something so powerful for someone I barely know. But you saved my life, and more than that, you treated me with respect and kindness when you could have done otherwise. You gave me shelter and warmth and hope when I had none. How could I not feel something for you? Nathan's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. I do not want to take advantage of your grief, he said. I do not want you to confuse gratitude with something deeper. When the storm passes and you are safe, if you still feel this way, then we can talk about what it might mean. But for now, let me just be here for you. Let me help you grieve and heal. It was the right thing to say, the honorable thing, and it made Felicity's heart ache with tenderness for this man who was trying so hard to do right by her, even when it was clear he wanted more. She nodded, and Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried for her father, for her lost future, for everything she had been, and everything she might become. The storm raged on through that day and into the night. Nathan kept them busy with small tasks, mending some of his trapping equipment, sorting through his supplies, teaching Felicity how to properly cure animal hides. She found she enjoyed the work, enjoyed learning these practical skills that had never been part of her merchant's daughter education. Nathan was a patient teacher, showing her how to scrape the flesh from a deer hide without tearing the skin, how to rub in the mixture of brain matter and water that would soften the leather. My mother was Cherokee, Nathan told her as they worked. She married my father, who was a white trapper, against her family's wishes. They disowned her for choosing him. She taught me many of the old ways before she died. This is how her people have prepared hides for countless generations. How did she die? Felicity asked gently. Cholera when I was 15, Nathan said. My father died the same week. I have been on my own since then, mostly. I have an older brother, Daniel, but he went west to California right after the war and I have not heard from him in years. Do not know if he is alive or dead. So we are both alone in the world, Felicity said. Maybe we do not have to be, Nathan replied, his eyes meeting hers across the hide they were working. That night, after another simple meal, they sat by the fire and Nathan pulled out a battered harmonica. Do you mind if I play? He asked. It helps pass the time. Please do, Felicity said. The music that came from that small instrument was achingly beautiful, mournful and hopeful at the same time. Nathan played old folk songs and hymns, and after a while Felicity found herself humming along, then singing softly. Her father had always said she had a pretty voice, and from the way Nathan's eyes lit up, he seemed to agree. They made music together late into the night, the storm howling outside while inside the cabin was warm and filled with something that felt almost like joy. The second day of the storm dawned much like the first, gray and furious. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together to maintain the cabin and care for the animals, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Felicity learned that Nathan loved poetry, particularly Wordsworth, and he would recite verses from memory while they worked. She told him about her dreams of running a successful business, of proving that women could be just as capable as men in the world of commerce. I do not doubt it for a moment, Nathan said. You have a sharp mind and a strong spirit. Any man who underestimates you will live to regret it. On the afternoon of the second day, Felicity finally felt ready to talk more about her father's death. Nathan listened without interrupting, as she described the moment the outlaws had entered the trading post, the way time had seemed to slow down as the first man raised his gun, the sound of the shots that had ended 3 lives in a matter of seconds. I keep thinking I should have done something, she said. Should have tried to stop them somehow. You would be dead too, Nathan said firmly. There was nothing you could have done against 3 armed men except exactly what you did, which was survive. Your father would not want you to carry guilt for his death. The only ones guilty are the men who pulled those triggers. I know you are right, but knowing and feeling are different things. They are, Nathan agreed. Grief is not logical. It does not follow rules or timelines. You will carry this pain for a long time, maybe forever in some form, but it will get easier. The sharp edges will dull. You will learn to live with it. You sound like you speak from experience. I do. The war taught me much about loss and grief. I saw friends die, good men who deserved better. I killed men too, enemy soldiers who were probably no more evil than I was, just fighting for their own side. For a long time after I came home, I could not sleep without seeing their faces. The guilt nearly destroyed me. But slowly, with time and prayer and the healing power of solitude, I found a way to live with what I had done and seen. You will find your way too. Felicity reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for not trying to tell me everything will be fine, or that I should simply move on. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. Life is rarely fine, but it can still be good, and moving on is not about forgetting. It is about learning to carry your losses with grace, and allowing yourself to still find joy when it comes. That night, Felicity lay in bed listening to Nathan's quiet breathing from his bedroll by the fire, and she realized with a start that she was not dreading the future for the first time since her father's death. The thought of leaving this cabin, of facing the world alone, still frightened her, but it did not seem impossible anymore. Nathan had given her something precious, not just shelter from the storm, but hope that she could rebuild her life from the ashes of tragedy. The third day dawned clearer. The wind had finally died down, though snow still fell in lazy, drifting flakes. Nathan opened the door and they looked out at a transformed landscape, everything buried under several feet of white, the trees heavy with snow, the world silent and pristine. The worst has passed, Nathan said. By tomorrow or the next day, we should be able to travel. Felicity felt an unexpected stab of disappointment. She knew they could not stay here forever, knew she had to face reality eventually, but part of her wanted to freeze this moment in time, to stay in this warm cabin with this man who made her feel seen and understood in a way no one else ever had. They spent the day preparing for departure, checking their gear and supplies, making sure the horses were ready for travel. But there was also an unspoken tension between them now, an awareness that their time together was running out and nothing had been decided about what would happen next. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Nathan finally broke the silence. "I have been thinking about what comes next," he said. "You said you had planned to go to Benton to open a store. Do you still want to do that?" "I do not know if I can," Felicity said. "I have no capital, no stock to sell. It was just a dream, and dreams die hard, but they do die." "What if they do not have to?" Nathan leaned forward, his expression intense. "I have money saved, more than you might think. Trapping has been good to me these past years, and I have few expenses living out here. I could provide the capital to start the business." Felicity stared at him. "Why would you do that? We barely know each other." "Because I believe in you," Nathan said simply. "Because I can see your passion and your intelligence, and I know you would make a success of it. And because I am asking you to let me be part of that success, part of your life. I am asking you to marry me, Felicity." The world seemed to stop. Felicity could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel the blood rushing through her veins. "You want to marry me?" she whispered. "I know it is too soon," Nathan said, his words tumbling out in a rush now. "I know you need time to grieve, time to heal. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or even next month. But I am asking you to consider it, to give us a chance. I told you I prayed for God to send someone through that storm, and I believe with all my heart that He sent you. I believe we are meant to be together, to build a life together. Tell me you feel it too. Tell me I am not going mad. "You are not going mad," Felicity said, tears streaming down her face now. "I feel it too. I have felt it since that first night when you took me in and treated me with such kindness. But Nathan, I am broken right now. I am grieving and lost, and I do not know who I am anymore without my father." Nathan moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking both her hands in his. "Then let me help you figure it out. Let me be there while you heal. I am not asking you to be anything other than who you are. I am not asking you to hide your grief or pretend to be happy when you are sad. I am just asking you to let me walk beside you through whatever comes next." Felicity looked down at their joined hands, his rough and scarred from hard work, hers smaller and softer but strong in their own way. She thought about what her father would say if he were here. She knew he would tell her to follow her heart, to seize happiness when it presented itself because life was too short and too uncertain to wait for the perfect moment. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will marry you. Not right away, but soon. When I am ready, when we are both sure." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was radiant. He surged up and pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she felt his heart beating against hers, strong and steady. When he pulled back, he cupped her face in his hands and looked at her with such love and wonder that it took her breath away. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision," he said. "I know you will," Felicity replied, and then she did something bold and reckless and completely unlike the proper merchant's daughter she had always been. She leaned forward and kissed him. Nathan went still for a moment, clearly surprised, then he kissed her back with a gentleness and passion that made her head spin. It was her first real kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more, a promise and a revelation all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "You are going to be the death of me, woman," he said, but he was smiling. "I certainly hope not," Felicity replied. "I rather like the idea of keeping you around for a good long while." They sat together by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans late into the night. They would travel to Benton once the roads were passable. Nathan knew people there, including a pastor who could marry them when they were ready and a lawyer who could help them set up the business properly. Nathan would sell his trapping equipment and use the money, combined with his savings, to fund the store. Felicity would manage the day-to-day operations while Nathan would handle the heavier work, building shelves and hauling stock and dealing with any troublesome customers. "We will need a name for the store," Felicity said. "What about Turner and Porter General Goods?" Nathan suggested. "Equal partners in business and in life." "I like that," Felicity said, smiling, "though I suppose it should be Turner and Turner once we are married." "Not if you do not want it to be," Nathan said. "You can keep your father's name if it honors his memory. The world may think it strange, but I do not care what the world thinks." Felicity felt her love for this man deepen even further. He understood, truly understood, how much her father had meant to her, and he was not threatened by her desire to keep that connection alive. The fourth day after Felicity's arrival dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue and the sun sparkling on the snow. Nathan ventured out early to assess the conditions, and came back reporting that while the snow was deep, the main trail was passable if they took it slow. "We can leave tomorrow," he said. "That will give us today to prepare properly." But that afternoon, as they were packing supplies, they heard the sound of horses and voices outside. Nathan immediately reached for his rifle, his expression going hard and watchful. He moved to the window and peered out, then relaxed slightly. "It is a search party," he said. "Looks like they are from Fort Smith based on the deputy's badge." Felicity's stomach clenched with anxiety. She had not thought about the fact that someone might come looking for survivors of the massacre, might be searching for her. Nathan opened the door as the group of 6 men rode up to the cabin. "Hello, the cabin," called the lead rider, a weathered man in his 50s with a deputy's star on his coat. "We are looking for survivors from the attack on the trading post 4 days ago. Have you seen anyone?" "I am here," Felicity said, stepping into the doorway beside Nathan. "I am Felicity Porter. I was at the trading post when it was attacked." The deputy's face showed relief. "Thank God you are alive, Miss Porter. We have been searching for you since we got word of the attack. When we found that horse missing, we hoped you had escaped, but with the storm, we feared the worst." "I would have died in the storm if I had not found this cabin," Felicity said. "Nathan Turner here saved my life." The deputy looked at Nathan with new respect. "That was well done, sir." "Miss Porter, I am sorry to tell you that your father did not survive the attack. Neither did the 2 other men who were in the trading post." "I know," Felicity said quietly. "I saw it happen before I escaped." "Did you get a good look at the men who did it?" the deputy asked. Felicity described the 3 outlaws as best she could, though in truth her memories of their faces were blurred by terror and shock. The deputy nodded grimly. "Sounds like the Taylor gang," he said. "They have been terrorizing this territory for months. We will catch them eventually, and when we do they will hang." "Good," Felicity said with a fierceness that surprised even her. The deputy cleared his throat. "Miss Porter, I hate to press you at such a time, but we need to discuss your father's affairs. He had some money in the bank in Fort Smith that is now yours, and there is the question of the trading post itself. If you would come back with us, we can help you sort everything out." Felicity glanced at Nathan, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I will come," she said, "but Nathan comes with me. He is my betrothed." The word felt strange on her tongue, foreign but right. The deputy's eyebrows rose, but he was too polite to comment on the speed of the engagement. "Of course, sir, you are welcome to accompany us." They spent the rest of the day preparing to leave. Nathan secured his cabin, hiding his most valuable possessions and boarding up the windows against any intruders. Felicity felt a pang of sadness as she looked around the small space that had been her refuge and the birthplace of her love for Nathan. So much had changed in just 4 days. She had arrived here a frightened girl fleeing tragedy, and she was leaving a woman who had found purpose and love in the most unexpected place. That night, their last in the cabin, Nathan held her close as they lay together in his bed. They did not make love, both agreeing that they would wait until they were properly married, but the intimacy of lying in each other's arms, feeling the warmth of each other's bodies, was profound in its own way. "Are you sure about this?" Nathan whispered in the darkness. "About us, about leaving your old life behind." "My old life is already gone," Felicity said. "My father is dead, and I can never go back to being the person I was before, but I am not afraid of that anymore because I have you. You showed me that I can survive, that I can be strong. You gave me hope when I had none. So yes, I am sure. I am more sure of this than I have been of anything in my life." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Felicity Porter. I know I should probably wait longer to say those words, should court you properly and do things the right way. But I do not want there to be any secrets between us, any words left unsaid. I love you, and I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Felicity said, and saying the words aloud made them real in a way they had not been before. "I love you, Nathan Turner, and I cannot wait to build a life with you." They left at dawn the next morning, Nathan on his buckskin and Felicity on her roan, following the search party back toward Fort Smith. The journey took 2 days through the snow-covered landscape, and Felicity found herself grateful for the company of the other men, who were respectful and kind despite their curiosity about her relationship with Nathan. She caught them watching Nathan with speculative looks, clearly trying to figure out what kind of man he was, whether he was worthy of her or simply taking advantage of a grieving woman. But Nathan ignored their scrutiny. His attention focused on Felicity, making sure she was warm enough, that she had enough to eat and drink, that the pace was not too taxing. His solicitousness was genuine rather than performative, and eventually even the most skeptical of the deputies seemed to accept that Nathan's feelings for her were real. They arrived in Fort Smith on a cold afternoon, and Felicity was immediately struck by how much the town felt like a stranger to her now. She had lived here for years, knew many of these streets and buildings, and yet she felt no connection to the place anymore. It was part of her past, not her future. The deputy took them to the bank, where the manager, a portly man named Mr. Simmons who had known her father, expressed his condolences and explained her father's financial situation. To her surprise, her father had been quite careful with his money. There was nearly $3,000 in the bank account, a substantial sum. "Your father was saving for something specific," Mr. Simmons said. "He mentioned a plan to expand the business, possibly relocate to a larger town." "Benton," Felicity said. "We were going to open a store in Benton." "Well, you certainly have the funds to do so now," Mr. Simmons said. "This money is yours free and clear, Miss Porter. Your father had no debts." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. Even in death, her father was taking care of her, providing for her future. She sent up a silent prayer of thanks, both for the money and for the man who had raised her so well. Over the next week, Felicity and Nathan stayed in Fort Smith while she settled her father's affairs. The trading post had been too badly damaged in the attack to reopen, but the land it sat on had value, and she was able to sell it. She also went through her father's personal effects, keeping some precious items like his pocket watch and Bible, selling or donating the rest. The hardest part was the funeral. Her father and the two other victims were buried in a simple ceremony at the town cemetery. Felicity stood between Nathan and the deputy, staring at the three fresh graves, and felt the finality of it all wash over her. Her father was truly gone. There would be no more conversations, no more shared meals, no more lessons in business or life. She would have to walk the rest of her road without him. But as Nathan's strong hand closed around hers, she realized she would not be walking alone. After the funeral, as they walked back toward the hotel where they were staying, Nathan said quietly, "We can wait if you need more time. There is no rush to leave Fort Smith or to marry or to start the business. We can take as long as you need." Felicity stopped walking and turned to face him. "I do not want to wait," she said firmly. "Every day I spend in this town is a day spent living in the past. I want to move forward, Nathan. I want to start our life together. I want to honor my father's memory by making his dream a reality." Nathan searched her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we leave for Benton tomorrow." "And we marry as soon as we can arrange it," Felicity added. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel rushed." "I am certain. My father would approve of you, Nathan. He would be glad to know I found someone who loves me for who I am, someone who treats me as an equal. He would tell me not to waste time mourning him when I could be building a future. So that is what I am going to do." They were married 3 days later in Benton by Pastor Williams, a kind elderly man with white hair and gentle eyes. The deputy who had found them and 2 of his men served as witnesses. Felicity wore a simple blue dress she had purchased with some of her inheritance, and Nathan wore his best clothes, which were still rough but clean and respectable. It was not the grand wedding she might have dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect in its simplicity and sincerity. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tenderness that Felicity felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were tears of joy this time, not grief, and she clung to her new husband with a sense of rightness that went bone deep. "I love you, Mrs. Turner," Nathan whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Turner," Felicity replied, smiling through her tears. They had rented rooms at a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who had immigrated from China years ago, and now ran one of the most respectable establishments in Benton. That night, in the privacy of their room, Nathan and Felicity consummated their marriage, and Felicity discovered a passion and connection she had never imagined possible. Nathan was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, she felt utterly complete. "I never knew it could be like this," she admitted, her head resting on his chest. "Neither did I," Nathan said, running his fingers through her hair. "I have been with women before, but it was never about love, just physical need. This is different. This matters." "We matter," Felicity said. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "We matter." They spent the next several months establishing Turner and Porter General Goods. They found a good location on Main Street, a building that had previously housed a dry goods store whose owner had retired and moved back east. The space was perfect, large enough for a variety of merchandise, but not so big that they would struggle to fill it. Nathan proved to be an excellent carpenter, building beautiful shelves and counters from local wood. Felicity used her business knowledge and her father's contacts to source quality merchandise at fair prices. They sold everything from tools and hardware to fabric and sewing supplies, from foodstuffs to books, from household goods to luxuries like imported tea and chocolate. Felicity kept meticulous records of every transaction, tracking which items sold well and which languished on the shelves. She proved to have a natural talent for merchandising, creating attractive displays that drew customers in and encouraged them to buy. Nathan handled the heavy work and also managed security, his imposing presence enough to discourage any would-be thieves. The people of Benton were curious about the new couple in town, especially when they learned that Nathan was part Cherokee. There were some who looked askance at a white woman married to a man with Indian blood, but most were welcoming, appreciating that the Turners were hard-working, honest, and provided quality goods at fair prices. Felicity made it clear from the start that she would not tolerate any disrespect toward her husband, and Nathan was grateful for her fierce defense of him. "You do not have to fight my battles," he told her one evening after she had rather forcefully ejected a customer who had made a disparaging comment about Nathan's heritage. "I am not fighting your battles," Felicity said. "I am fighting our battles. We are a partnership, remember. And I will not allow anyone to treat my husband with anything less than the respect he deserves." Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "Only 3 times," Felicity said, laughing, "but I never get tired of hearing it." As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, the store prospered. They were not getting rich, but they were making a comfortable living and building a good reputation. They also became active members of the community, attending church services, participating in town events, making friends. Felicity was particularly close to Mrs. Chen, whose wisdom and experience proved invaluable, and to Sarah Mitchell, the school teacher who shared Felicity's belief that women deserved education and opportunity. In October, exactly a year after her father's death and her marriage to Nathan, Felicity realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she missed her 3rd monthly course and started experiencing morning sickness, she knew for certain. She waited until evening when the store was closed and they were alone in their small apartment above the shop to tell Nathan. "I have news," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face. Nathan looked up from the ledger he was reviewing, his expression immediately alert. "What is it?" "We are going to have a baby," Felicity said. For a moment Nathan just stared at her, his face blank with shock. Then his expression transformed into one of pure joy. He leapt up from his chair and crossed the room in 2 strides, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. "A baby," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Oh, Felicity, I cannot believe it. This is wonderful." "You are happy?" she asked, though his reaction had already made that clear. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said, setting her down gently and placing his hand over her still flat stomach. "You have made me the happiest man alive. A wife I adore, a business that is succeeding, and now a child. It is more than I ever dared hope for when I was alone in that cabin." "I thank God every day that I found you in that storm," Felicity said seriously. "You gave me back my life, Nathan. You gave me a reason to keep going when I wanted to give up. And now we are creating a new life together. It feels like a miracle." "It is a miracle," Nathan agreed. "You are my miracle." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Felicity continued working in the store almost until the day she went into labor. She was determined to prove that becoming a mother would not diminish her capabilities as a businesswoman. Nathan supported her completely while also being protective in a way that Felicity found endearing rather than stifling. He made sure she never lifted anything too heavy, insisted she take breaks when she looked tired, and worried constantly that she was working too hard. Their daughter was born on a warm evening in late May of 1882, after 12 hours of labor that left Felicity exhausted but elated. Nathan was there for the whole thing, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, despite the midwife's initial protests that it was not proper for a husband to be present during childbirth. Nathan had simply told the woman that he had promised to be there for his wife through everything, and he was not about to break that promise now. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Nathan wept openly. He held his daughter with shaking hands, staring down at her tiny face with such wonder that Felicity fell in love with him all over again. "She is beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you." "She has your eyes," Felicity said, and it was true. Even at only minutes old, the baby's eyes were already showing hints of that startling pale blue. They named her Clara Rose Turner, Clara after Nathan's mother and Rose after Felicity's. Little Clara was a good baby, fussy only when hungry or wet, and she seemed to thrive from the start. Nathan was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Clara when she cried at night, singing Cherokee lullabies his mother had sung to him. Felicity watched her husband with their daughter and marveled at how much love she felt for both of them. Running the store with a newborn proved challenging, but they made it work. Mrs. Chen helped by watching Clara sometimes, and they rigged up a cradle behind the counter so the baby could be near them while they worked. Customers loved seeing little Clara, and business actually improved as people stopped in just to coo over the baby. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The store continued to prosper. Clara grew from a baby into a toddler, and then a little girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. In the spring of 1884, when Clara was nearly 2, Felicity discovered she was pregnant again. This time Nathan's joy was more subdued but no less genuine. "Are you sure you are ready for another?" he asked. "Managing the store and Clara keeps you so busy." "I am sure," Felicity said. "I want Clara to have siblings, to never be alone the way I was after my mother died. And we can afford it now. The store is doing well enough that we can hire some help if we need to." Their son was born in December of 1884, a big, healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs like a bull. They named him James Porter Turner. James after no one in particular, but just because they liked the name, and Porter to honor Felicity's father. With 2 children and the store demanding constant attention, life became busier than ever. They did hire help, a young man named Thomas who was good with numbers and eager to learn the business. This freed up Nathan to spend more time with the children while Felicity focused on the aspects of the business she enjoyed most, the buying and merchandising and customer relations. The years passed in a blur of work and family and quiet happiness. Clara grew into a bright, curious child who loved to help in the store, already showing signs of having inherited her parents' business sense. James was more rambunctious, always getting into mischief but with such a sweet nature that it was hard to stay mad at him for long. In 1887, they had another daughter whom they named Alice May, and in 1889 a third daughter, Emily Grace. By 1890, 10 years after that fateful storm had thrown them together, Nathan and Felicity had built a life beyond anything either of them had imagined possible. Turner and Porter General Goods was one of the most successful businesses in Benton, known throughout the region for quality merchandise and fair dealing. They had 4 healthy, happy children and a house they had built on the outskirts of town, with enough land for a garden and a few animals. One evening in November, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard, Felicity leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, putting his arm around her. "I am thinking about that storm," Felicity said. 10 years ago, I was so lost, so broken, I thought my life was over, and then I found you or you found me and everything changed. I told you I had prayed for God to send someone through that storm, Nathan said quietly. I meant it. I had been alone for so long, and I was starting to think that was my fate, to live and die alone in those mountains. But then you appeared, and I knew immediately that you were the answer to my prayers. I asked God to send you through that storm, Felicity repeated, the words Nathan had spoken to her during those first days in the cabin. You really believed that, did you not? That God had sent me specifically to you? I did and I do, Nathan said. I believe we were meant to find each other, that all the tragedy and hardship you endured led you to that cabin on that night. I do not pretend to understand God's ways or why terrible things happen to good people like your father. But I do believe that even in the darkest moments, there can be purpose and meaning. Your father's death was a tragedy, but it led you to me, and together we created all of this. He gestured to the house, the children, the life they had built. I believe it too, Felicity said. I used to feel guilty about being happy, like I was betraying my father's memory by moving on. But I realized that living well, building a good life, that is the best way to honor him. He wanted me to be happy. He wanted me to thrive. And I am, Nathan. I am so happy. So am I, Nathan said, kissing the top of her head. More than I ever thought possible. Clara came running up to the porch then, her blue eyes bright with excitement. At 8 years old, she was starting to look less like a little girl and more like the young woman she would become. Papa James says he can catch more fireflies than me, but I know I can catch more. Will you be the judge? Nathan laughed and stood up. Of course I will be the judge. That is what papas are for, is it not? To settle disputes and count fireflies. He went down into the yard with Clara, and Felicity watched as he gathered all 4 children around him, turning the firefly catching into a game they could all play together. James whooped and ran after a particularly bright firefly. Alice and Emily chased after their brother, giggling. Nathan caught Felicity's eye and smiled, and the love she saw in his face made her heart swell. Later, After the children were in bed and she and Nathan lay together in their own room, Felicity said, "You ever miss it? The solitude, the trapping, the quiet of the mountains." Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes," he admitted. "There is a part of me that will always be drawn to wild places, to solitude, but I do not miss being alone. I do not miss the loneliness that came with that life. What I have here with you and the children, this is infinitely better. This is what I was meant for, I think. Not to live alone in the mountains, but to build a family, to love and be loved. The mountains taught me many things, but you taught me how to live." "And you taught me how to survive," Felicity said. "How to be strong when I thought I could not be, how to build something from nothing." "We taught each other," Nathan said, pulling her close. "That is what love is, I think. Two people making each other better, stronger, more complete." They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the house settling around them, the occasional murmur of one of the children dreaming. This was their life now, solid and real and good. It had been built on tragedy and chance, on a storm that had nearly killed Felicity, but had instead brought her to Nathan. She thought about all the small decisions and moments that had led to this, to lying in bed with the man she loved in a house full of children in a town where they were respected and valued. If she had stayed at the trading post that day, she would have died with her father. If she had fled in any other direction, she would have frozen to death in the storm. If Nathan's cabin had been even a mile further in any direction, she would never have found it. The margins had been so thin, the line between death and life so narrow. But she had survived, and Nathan had been there, and they had found in each other something neither had known they needed. In the years that followed, the store continued to thrive, and the children grew. Clara did indeed go into business, eventually taking over management of Turner and Porter General Goods when Felicity and Nathan were ready to step back. James became a teacher like Mrs. Mitchell, dedicated to education and helping young people learn. Alice married a banker and moved to Little Rock, while Emily stayed in Benton and became a seamstress known throughout the region for her beautiful work. Nathan and Felicity lived to see grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. They grew old together, their hair turning gray and then white, their bodies slowing but their love never diminishing. They took walks together every evening, weather permitting, Nathan holding Felicity's hand, just as he had that first night in the cabin when she had been frozen and terrified, and he had offered her warmth and safety. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1931, when Felicity was 71 and Nathan was 75, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were dozens of them now, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them there to honor the couple who had built this family from nothing but love and determination. Clara, now 49 and looking very much like her mother had at that age, stood up to give a toast. "To my parents," she said, raising her glass, "who taught us all that love is stronger than tragedy, that with faith and hard work in each other, we can overcome anything. They built not just a business but a legacy of love and respect and partnership that has carried through this entire family. We are all here because 51 years ago, a storm drove my mother to my father's cabin, and he took her in and they fell in love. It was not a conventional courtship, but nothing about my parents has ever been conventional, and we are all better for it." "Hear, hear," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Later, when the party had wound down and most of the family had gone home, Nathan and Felicity sat together on the porch of the house they had lived in for more than 40 years. The store had been passed to Clara years ago, and they now spent their days in quiet retirement, tending their garden, reading, and enjoying the peace they had earned. 50 years, Felicity said wonderingly. "It has gone by so fast." "And so slow," Nathan said. Sometimes I can still remember that first night as clearly as if it were yesterday. You standing in my doorway, frozen and frightened and so brave. I fell in love with you right then, I think, though it took me a few days to admit it to myself. I fell in love with you when you knelt down to take off my wet boots and said I was safe, Felicity said. No one had ever made me feel safe the way you did in that moment. And you have kept me safe every day since, not by protecting me from the world but by standing beside me as I faced it. We have had a good life, Nathan said. The best life, Felicity agreed. I would not change a single thing, not even the pain that brought me to you. Every moment, good and bad, led to us, to our family. I am grateful for all of it. Nathan took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. I asked God to send you through that storm, he said, repeating the words he had spoken so many times over the years. And he did. He sent me exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed it. You were my salvation, Felicity, in every way that matters. And you were mine, Felicity said, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. My love, my partner, my everything. They sat together as the sun set. Two old people who had loved each other for more than half a century, who had built a life and a family and a legacy together. The storm that had driven them together was long past, but the love it had sparked burned as bright as ever. Nathan Turner died peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, at the age of 78. Felicity held his hand as he passed, whispering to him about their children and grandchildren, about the store and the cabin and the storm, about all the years of love they had shared. When he drew his last breath, she kissed him goodbye and thanked him one final time for saving her life all those years ago. Felicity lived another 5 years without him, supported by her large and loving family. She spent those years writing down the story of how she and Nathan had met, wanting future generations to know about the storm and the cabin and the man who had taken in a frightened young woman and given her not just shelter but a whole new life. She told about her father's death and her desperate flight, about finding the cabin and Nathan's kindness, about falling in love during those days trapped by the blizzard. She wrote about Nathan's confession that he had prayed for God to send someone through the storm, that he had been praying for purpose and meaning, and she had appeared like an answer. She wrote about their wedding and the store and the children, about building a life together from the ashes of tragedy. She wrote about love, real and enduring and powerful enough to transform two broken people into something whole. When Felicity died in 1939 at the age of 79, she was buried beside Nathan in the Benton Cemetery. Their graves were marked with a simple stone that read, Nathan Turner and Felicity Porter Turner, united by love, blessed by God. Their story, carefully written out in Felicity's neat hand, was preserved by their children and passed down through generations. And every November, when the first snow began to fall, their descendants would remember the storm that had brought Nathan and Felicity together, the cabin that had sheltered them, and the love that had sustained them through 50 years of marriage and a lifetime of devotion. They would remember Nathan's words, the confession that had revealed the depth of his faith and his love. I asked God to send you through that storm. And Felicity's answer, spoken from the heart of a woman who had found in tragedy the seeds of joy. And he did. He sent me to exactly where I needed to be, to exactly who I needed. He sent me home. The blizzard had lasted only a few days, but the love it kindled burned for a lifetime and beyond, warming not just Nathan and Felicity but all those who came after them, proof that even in the darkest, coldest storms, God can send us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it most, if only we have faith enough to see it.